Hi, it's Alex again here, and welcome back to the channel. I was going to talk today about how suitable the 890 Venture R is for brand new riders, so people who are going off-road for the first time. And back in September, that was me. I'd never ever ridden any sort of dirt bike, never ridden any bike off-road, and I'd only ever ridden motorbikes on road, so it's a brand new experience for me. And I really sort of debated about whether it was appropriate to, jump on, quite a mid-sized adventure bike, which is quite heavy. And I decided to take the plunge, did the course for 2 days to actually get used to it. And it was really, really good fun. I learned a huge amount, but also realised that you can do a weekend course and it'll give you the basics, but so much of this is about hours on the pegs, just hours and hours of practicing and getting used to that feel of the bike. And I would suggest that the 890 Venture R is an amazing bike for beginners, because actually it can take you everywhere. You can commute on it, you can go around town, you can do longer journeys, and then you can actually do what it's meant to do, which is going off-road. And that's the big fun thing, having those adventures going off-road. So I found this beautiful location, and I'm going to just do a few little bits and pieces of green lanes. Now, green lanes are what we do in the UK, nothing like the open spaces you get in the UK. And I see from my sort of statistics that I've got a lot of viewers in the US, and it'd be lovely to get over there at some point and ride some of your huge wilderness spaces. But I've got this, this is the UK, this is spring in the UK, and it is, pretty stunning if you look at it. Everything's beginning to come out. Got tons and tons of wild garlic, which is even nicer and smells amazing. And just as a bit of an offside on this, I made some pesto with this wild garlic last night, which was absolutely delicious. So let's have a look at how good this bike is off-road and whether it really is suitable for beginners, and my views and comments on this. And I'd welcome any feedback in the chat, so just feel free to get in contact, and we'll get some debate going on about what is a good bike for beginning off-road. Good evening, everyone. So as you heard in the introduction, I wanted to really just have a look about how suitable the 890 Adventure R is for beginner off-roaders. And when I say beginner off-roaders, I don't mean people who've not ridden bikes before. People who've been on road bikes but have never ever been off-road. And how it actually looks after us and whether it works. And I'd never ridden off-road before September last year, so this is a steep learning curve for me. This is the first off-road bike I've had. I've never ridden dirt bikes of any sort, and it's been quite a steep learning curve. But what we'll do is just start on some easy stuff and see how that goes. And you'll get used to me in my videos just always saying, gotta be really careful with dog walkers here, but like that. No worries, no, it's me causing the trouble. Are you going this way, or are you going this way? Yeah, just go through it. Yeah, that's fine, sorry. So like I said, always on the lookout for dog walkers. And it really puts you off when you're on corners like that, because you're all set up ready to take the corner, and all of a sudden you have to stop. It's prime time to actually drop the bike, and I've done that a few times. So these are fairly easy lanes, and in terms of what we can do on them, it's the bike just pootles along. In terms of beginnery stuff, it's very accomplished and it looks after you. When I first get on the 890 Venture R, it seemed really tall. I'm not a really tall bloke. I'm about 173 centimetres tall, about 5'7" and a bit on a tall day. And after coming off the 1290 with the low seat, the 890 did feel really tall. And I still find that's an issue, and I think that might be one of the biggest issues for beginners off-road on this bike. Just that slight teetering feeling when you come to a stop, or if there's not enough ground beneath one foot. And I've definitely fallen off once or twice when I've sort of done an unexpected stop with a walkers or something, and there's just been no ground to put my foot on. So it does seem like a tall bike. I've got the lowered seat on this, and it's still pretty tiptoeing when I straddle the bike. So just bear that in mind if you're going to use it anywhere. On road's not too bad, but off-road you know, if you want to get your feet on the ground, then that'd be worth thinking about. You can get lower shock absorbers as well, which lower it by about another, or springs for the shock absorbers, which will lower it by about another 20 millimeters. So with the seat and the shock absorber, you can probably lower it by about 45 millimeters. I'm a bit reluctant to go down that route. One, because of cost, and two, because I'm not quite sure how it would change how the bike feels. I mean, apparently it's not going to change it very much at all. So from a beginner perspective, you know, I think it is a tallish bike if you're not a tall person. They say it's, you know, a mid-weight, but it's actually about 220 kilos with fluids. And you know, you add some extra bits onto that. So today I've actually decided to put panniers on, brought my toolkit and bits and pieces, a bit of camera equipment, and you're probably up to about 235, 240 kilos. The good thing is I've dropped this bike a lot. You know, I've probably dropped it, I don't know, 20, 25 times, and I've never really struggled to pick it up. Even when it's sort of stuck in a funny angle, it's not been a struggle at any point to pick it up, which is really good, you know. But you know, just make sure you do have a bit of strength and fitness if you are going to take a, you know, mid to big adventure bike off road. So it's a little bit rockier, a bit gully. But you know, it's really good. The bike behaves really well. Let's have a look at what makes the bike good for us off-road. So how does it help us if we're new to off-roading on a mid to big weighted adventure bike? And one of the big things it has got is just really good electronics. Now, there are lots of people out there, lots of purists who might say actually you should be learning to ride a bike without electronics. But as I get older and, you know, I do my work at the ambulance service and I see lots of really nasty motorbike injuries, I want stuff to keep me safe. I don't want to be sort of taking my life from my hands and just relying completely on my skill. And if I can get rider aids to help me be safer or actually control the bike better, that I can then modify progressively as I learn the bike, then I'm really happy with that, and I'm going to take that every day. So the 890's got really good traction control into standard off-road mode. So it gives some wheel slippage, but it's very predictable, and you just, when it happens, you know it's happening and you think, oh, okay, it worked, because it scoots out the rear end, but then it just comes back under control, and it's quite a magical feeling when it does that. So learning to trust that is really key, and actually learning to ride without mashing the rear wheel and doing lots of wheel spin is really important. But when it does kick in, it's fairly subtle and quite a relaxed traction control that kicks in. Now, I've got the tech pack on this bike, and that's got the rally mode on it, and with that you can dial the rear wheel slip from 1 to 9, with 9 being pretty equivalent to rain mode, which is really sensitive traction control that will kick in on anything to try and stop that rear wheel spinning, right down to level 1, where it's just, it'll just keep going, the wheel will spin as far as it wants. And I've had a really good play around with these, especially in the mud over the winter. And you find that in the mud, if you're turning it down too far, down to sort of levels 3-ish, then the rear wheel really does just spin too much in quite thick mud that's deep. But if you turn it back up again to about 6 or 7, then it gives that sort of similar control to what you get with the off-road mode. So the electronics are really good. Next bit is you can change the ABS. So you can modify the front and rear ABS by turning the rear ABS off, so you can lock the back wheel and you can skid around turns. You can use it to just regulate your speed. You're still using that front brake to get pretty much all your stopping power though, and it just desensitizes the ABS on the front wheel, so it would still lock on a loose enough surface, but it desensitizes it and it takes away the lean sensitivity on that ABS on the front wheel. And to be honest, I've not really noticed it kicking in at all at the moment. You know, I've done lots of downhill stuff, some fairly twitchy gravel downhill, which is just not fun. But the traction control hasn't really done anything. And I remember I did the course in Wales, there was one guy there who did keep managing to lock up the front wheel and kept dropping the bike, but I think that's just because he was grabbing a big handful of front brake each time he did it. So, you know, I think if we're progressive, if we look for our places to brake, then we can do that majority of braking with our front wheel and the bike looks after us really well. The other thing I like on the 890 is just the power of it, you know, the torque and the power. It means that you've got lots of low down torque to just get you up the hills and to get you through things. And because it's that upgrade on the engine and you've got that heavier crankshaft in the engine with more rotating mass, it means that it's a lot trickier to stall it down at the low end. So I think as a beginner, that's really helpful because you've got that sort of extra momentum within the engine to stop stalls. And that seems to work really well. Let's go back to the beginner side of it. If you're going to ride stuff like this, it's really pretty pleasant. You know, just go nice and slow. It's a heavy bike, so you know, just go nice and slow and control your speed well. And the bike will just roll over all this stuff. But what you notice as a beginner is, you know, the bike feels heavy. And they're all going to feel heavy when you get to this sort of size. So it certainly takes a lot more stopping when you're going downhill. And let's just keep it under control. And I know the GoPro flattens things, but yeah, this is actually fairly steep downhill. So you'll be really gentle on that front brake. Let's keep it really progressive. When you do stuff like this, just try a bit more progressive braking and just see what the front brake does. So I just felt the ABS and the front brake kick in there. I squeezed it a bit harder just to see what it'd do, but the wheel kept turning. So the bit I was talking about in terms of the ABS, sort of, you know, desensitising a bit off-road for the front wheel, it still does do something. You find these rock gullies, they tend to channel you a bit. But again, I was just using a bit too much front brake there. Looking ahead. Yeah, if you just get that front brake a bit hard, you can just feel the ABS pulsing a little bit. Let's come on to what I don't like about the 890 Adventure R. There's not many things that I don't like about it. One thing that I've really noticed is quite consistent, and it might just be my lack of skill, I've got no idea, but very often when you're trying to go into second, it'll just stay in neutral, so you've got to do a very active movement to get into second. So when you are off-road and you're trying to get that second gear, which is, you know, probably the most useful gear in terms of reducing that wheel spin that you get in first gear, it can very often just click into neutral and stay there. So you have to be quite mindful about getting it into second with an active movement. The second thing that I find quite challenging as, you know, a relatively short rider is the height of the bike. And I have got a lowered saddle, and I've talked about that already, but the lowered saddle does help, and it means I can sort of get my toes on the ground, so none of the front, like the ball of my foot, but I can get my toes on the ground both sides when the ground is level. The issue with that is off-roading, it's often not level where you stop and you put your foot down and you just go over sideways, which is disconcerting and embarrassing if people are watching. So that's just one of the things you need to be mindful of, just looking for those places to stop where you can put your foot down easily. The third thing I found quite tricky with the bike when I first got it was the standard Karoq tyres, and I was advised to, you know, get rid of them pretty soon, but I did try them off-road and they felt nothing like the bikes I've been using on the course that I did up in Wales. Yeah, the grip wasn't there, the stability wasn't there, and it didn't feel fun. It felt very jittery. So I did change to the Continental TKC 80s, which have been absolutely amazing tyres through the winter, and really impressed with those. So it could be worth thinking about your tyres. And while we're on the subject of tyres, we could talk about de-airing them as well, so letting some air out of the tyres. Now, there's lots on the forums about people saying, oh, you shouldn't let the air out of big adventure bike tyres, and that sort of makes sense because of the weight, and if you think of rim damage, that does make sense. But if you look in the manual for the 890, it does say that you can have two different tyre pressures. So from the road you can go for 36 psi, pounds per square inch, and off-road it recommends 26 £5 per square inch front and back. Now that's quite soft, and I like to get a bit of a compromise going here, especially as I'm riding around in between the green lanes. So I tend to go to about 28 on the front and 30 on the rear. And that made a really dramatic difference to the off-road handling. You could feel just the bumps and the stones just being soaked up a little bit better. And I've not had any sort of occurrences where things have hit or I felt a rim sort of squidge in or anything like that. And it just seems to be a really nice combination of tyre pressures that really changes how the bike feels off-road. So have a play with that yourself. You know, there are lots of different views on it. I'm not saying I'm right or wrong, and you know, I always say I'm no expert, but I'm just going what I feel and what I've noticed with the differences when I do change these things. This is actually quite fun now. It's I could level a bit. So in terms of off-road bikes, I'm really inexperienced. You know, I've not really ridden any others. I'm booked in for an Africa Twin 2-day adventure in June, which I'm going to hope to do a film about. So that's going to be a bit different. It's quite nice, but this is the only bike I've ridden off-road. So yeah, it's not the best for you. I've got nothing to compare it to. But what I can say, you know, is that I was a complete beginner in how I felt about it, and you know, it's felt really good. You know, the bike's looked after me, it's felt dependable, it's felt fairly planted and settled. The electronics are helpful without sort of being invasive. So I think as a beginner to off-road with a reasonable amount of road experience, I think you can probably take to a bike like this fairly easily. And so yeah, back to what I was saying, when you sort of take this bike on road, it's great, it hustles really well. Yeah, it's not like the RC8 I had, or road bikes, but it's a really, really good bike. It'll keep up with most people who are sensible. And more to the point, it's really good fun to ride. It's really planted on the road, it's really affirmative in its feedback, and it's just great fun. Sound is amazing. And it'll do that all day. Yeah, I'd say the only downside to this bike is probably on sort of motorways and fast roads. Yeah, it's very happy up to about 65, 70 miles an hour. I'd say 65 is top end for comfortable in terms of wind blast and noise. So that's probably the only downside to it. And compared to the 1290 Super Adventure I had, that was just a sort of interstellar spaceship. It just went, and really comfortable, really smooth, really powerful, and it just did the job really nicely. So there's always going to be a bit of a compromise on bikes, and it's where you decide to place that compromise really. And I got the compromise a bit wrong when I got the 1290, because it really wouldn't allow me to do any off-road. The compromise on this is that I might have to take a bit longer and longer journeys if I choose to take the bike. So it's trying to find that unicorn bike, isn't it? The one that does everything, it does all the jobs we want it to. And I think we have to be honest with ourselves about working out what we actually want. I thought the 1290 was super cool and just looked really impressive, and I had people coming up to me talking to me about it, but then I realised it was a mistake. And this is probably the nicest bike I've ever had. It's the one I just look forward to getting on the whole time. I just want to ride it the whole time, just because it feels comfortable. The feedback from it just lets you ride it how you want to ride it. So to try and sum up, you know, would I recommend this bike for somebody who's not ridden off-road before? And I think yes, you know, it's I'm just enjoying it so much. It's such good fun, and you know, it's got everything I need to, you know, take me to a much higher level if I get there. We can razz it a bit on stuff like that, have a bit of fun. So thanks for watching again. I hope you found that a useful video. I'm really impressed with the 890 Adventure R as a beginner off-road bike, but I only feel like I'm scratching the surface of it. I think it's got loads more to give. It's got so much capability and so much potential that I'm really only scratching that surface at the moment. So I'm really looking forward to riding it more, really looking forward to getting more time off-road and really sort of seeing what this bike is capable of. But as a new off-road adventure rider, this bike has absolutely been perfect. I think it is the unicorn bike. So thanks very much for watching. Appreciate your time always. It'd be amazing if you'd consider subscribing to the channel, and I look forward to seeing you again on the next video. Thanks for watching.